She slammed open the door, the look on her face terrifying. Her hands pointed at him, the traitor. The sound of Stephanie's palm hitting Shin Jong-woo's table echoed through the empty executive floor like a gunshot. "You had him beaten?" Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her beautiful dark skin. "What gave you the right?" Jong-woo's golden hair fell across his eyes as his head snapped to the side, but he didn't move, didn't defend himself. His jaw clenched, a red mark blooming across his perfect cheekbone. "Answer me." Stephanie's hands trembled as she shoved against his chest. 3 years. 3 years I waited for you to see me. And now that I've finally moved on, you think you can just... He doesn't even deserve you. Jong-woo's voice was quiet, deadly. The words stopped her cold. "What?" "Your boyfriend, Richard." He stepped closer, and she could see something dangerous flickering in those dark eyes. "He's been using you for months. That's why I sent them." Stephanie's world tilted. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, and her stomach dropped at what she saw on the screen. But before we see what Stephanie does next, what do you think happened? Do you think Jong-woo is telling the truth? Was he protecting her or just being possessively jealous? Drop your theories in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe because this story is about to get intense. Hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's get into the story. 3 years ago, Stephanie Stevenson had arrived in Seoul with nothing but a suitcase, a work visa, and a dream that felt almost foolish to say out loud. At 25, she'd left everything familiar behind her family in Indianapolis, her college friends, the comfortable rhythm of American life, all for a junior assistant position at Shin Enterprises. Her mother had cried at the airport, "Baby, are you sure about this? It's so far, and you don't even speak Korean." But Stephanie had been sure. She'd studied international business, learned basic Korean through apps and online courses, and when the opportunity came to work for one of South Korea's fastest-growing tech conglomerates, she'd seized it with both hands. She hadn't expected Shin Jong-woo. Her first day, she'd been escorted to the top floor of the gleaming glass tower in Gangnam. The HR director, a stern woman named Mrs. Park, had walked her through the marble corridors, her heels clicking like a metronome. "Mr. Shin is particular," Mrs. Park had said, her English crisp and precise. "He's young for a CEO, only 32, but don't let that fool you. He built this company from the ground up after his father tried to force him into the family's traditional manufacturing business. He's brilliant, demanding, and he doesn't tolerate incompetence." "I understand," Stephanie had replied, smoothing down her conservative black pencil skirt. She'd dressed carefully that morning, wanting to look professional, capable, invisible enough not to stand out in a country where she already stood out simply by existing. Mrs. Park had paused outside a set of frosted glass doors. "One more thing, Miss Stevenson. You're the first foreign assistant Mr. Shin has ever had. Some people in the company, they questioned his decision to hire you. Prove them wrong." Then she'd opened the doors, and Stephanie had seen him for the first time. Shin Jong-woo stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the Seoul skyline. Even from behind, he was striking tall and lean, with shoulders that filled out his tailored navy suit perfectly. When he turned, Stephanie's breath had caught. He was beautiful, not handsome in a conventional sense, but beautiful in the way K-pop idols were beautiful, ethereal, almost unreal. His golden blonde hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. His eyes were dark, intense, and when they landed on her, she'd felt pinned in place like a butterfly under glass. "Miss Stevenson." His English was flawless, barely accented. "Welcome to Shin Enterprises. I hope you're prepared to work harder than you've ever worked in your life." "Yes, sir," she'd managed, extending her hand. He'd looked at her hand for a long moment before taking it. His palm was warm, his grip firm, and the contact had lasted exactly 3 seconds before he'd released her and turned back to the window. "Mrs. Park will show you to your desk. I need the quarterly reports compiled and on my desk by noon. I also need you to reschedule my meeting with the Samsung executives. They keep trying to push for Thursday, but I want Friday afternoon. And call my driver and tell him I'll need the car at 7, not 6. Stephanie had pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen as she made notes. Got it. Anything else? He'd glanced back at her, something flickering across his face. Surprise, maybe, or approval. That's all for now. Dismissed. That had been 3 years ago. 3 years of 12-hour days, of learning to anticipate Jong-woo's needs before he voiced them, of becoming fluent in Korean through sheer immersion and determination. 3 years of watching him build his empire, of being there for every success and every setback. 3 years of falling hopelessly, stupidly, irrevocably in love with a man who barely seemed to notice she existed beyond her utility. It had started small. 6 months into her job, Stephanie had noticed that Jong-woo always seemed stressed on Mondays. He'd snap at employees, his jaw would be tight, and he'd work through lunch without eating. So one Monday, she'd stopped by his favorite bakery, a tiny place in Itaewon that made the most incredible red bean pastries, and placed one on his desk with his morning coffee. He'd stared at it when he came in, then looked up at her. "What's this?" "You seemed stressed last Monday. I thought you might like something sweet." For a long moment, he'd just looked at her. Then he'd picked up the pastry, taken a bite, and nodded. "Thank you, Miss Stevenson." After that, it became a ritual. Every Monday, she'd bring him a pastry. And she'd noticed, though he never said anything, that his Mondays became a little less tense. Then there were the notes. Stephanie had always been a writer at heart. She loved words, loved the way they could convey meaning and emotion. So she'd started leaving little notes on Jong-woo's desk each morning. Nothing personal, nothing inappropriate, just small observations or quotes that seemed to fit the day. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. Happy Tuesday, Mr. Shin. The Seoul skyline looks particularly beautiful this morning. I hope your day is just as bright. Coffee's extra hot today. You're going to need it for the board meeting. She'd never signed them, never expected acknowledgement, but she'd noticed that he kept them. She'd seen them filed away in his desk drawer once when she was looking for a stapler. And there were other moments. Small, fleeting moments that made her heart race. Like the time it had started pouring during her lunch break, and she'd come back to the office, soaked through. Jong-woo had looked up from his computer, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. "Miss Stevenson, you're wet." "It's raining," she'd said, stating the obvious, water dripping from her curls onto the marble floor. He'd stood up, shrugged off his jacket, and draped it around her shoulders before she could protest. "Dry off. Take an early day if you need to." The jacket had smelled like him expensive cologne and something uniquely Jong-woo. She'd worn it home and hadn't wanted to give it back. Or the time she'd worked until 2 a.m. helping him prepare for an investor presentation. She'd finally stood up to leave, swaying slightly from exhaustion, and his hand had shot out to steady her. Careful. His hand had been on her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her blouse, and for one suspended moment, they'd just stood there. His dark eyes had been unreadable, but his thumb had moved just slightly against her hip, and she'd felt that small motion everywhere. Then he'd released her abruptly. "Go home, get some rest." She'd lain awake all night, replaying that moment, trying to decode it. There were other signs, too. The way his eyes would follow her when she moved around the office. The way he seemed to notice everything about her. If she changed her hair. If she wore a new outfit. If she seemed tired or upset. Once, during a particularly difficult quarter when layoffs were being discussed, she'd found him standing by the window at sunset, his shoulders tense. "Mr. Shin?" She'd approached carefully. "Is everything okay?" 70 people, Miss Stevenson. I have to lay off 70 people who have families, mortgages, children in school." His voice had been raw. "How am I supposed to do that?" Without thinking, she'd touched his arm. "You'll do it with compassion. You'll give them generous severance packages, help them find new positions, write glowing recommendations. You'll do everything you can to soften the blow. Because that's who you are." He'd looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "You have a lot of faith in me. You've earned it." Something had shifted in his expression, then something vulnerable and hungry and almost afraid. He'd opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. "Thank you, Miss Stevenson. That will be all." She'd left his office with her heart pounding, convinced that something was building between them, that all these small moments were leading somewhere. She'd been so sure. It was a Thursday afternoon when Stephanie's world shattered. She'd been walking toward Jongwoo's office with some contracts that needed his signature when she'd heard voices inside. The door was slightly ajar, and she'd been about to knock when she'd heard laughter. Male laughter. "I'm telling you, Jongwoo, you need to settle down," a voice was saying. It sounded like Kim Tae-young, one of Jongwoo's old friends from university who now worked in the legal department. "My mother has been asking me to introduce you to my cousin. She's beautiful, elegant, from a good family." "I'm not interested in meeting your cousin, Tae-young." Jongwoo's voice was amused. "Why not? Is there someone else?" Another voice chimed in, Park Jimin from accounting. "There's no one." "Come on, we've known you for 10 years. You can tell us." Tae-young's voice turned conspiratorial. "Is it that foreign assistant of yours? What's her name, Stephanie?" Stephanie's hand had frozen on the door handle. "That American girl?" Jimin laughed. "Jongwoo wouldn't go for someone like her." "Why not?" Tae-young sounded genuinely curious. "She's attractive, in an exotic sort of way." "She's black, Tae-young." Jimin's voice dripped with disdain. "Korean men don't date black women. They're too much. Too loud, too aggressive, too different." "I don't know," Tae-young mused. "I've seen the way Jongwoo looks at her sometimes. Maybe he has a soft spot for the blacks. At least the women, anyway." There was a moment of silence. Stephanie held her breath, waiting for Jongwoo to say something. To defend her. To tell them they were wrong. That she was more than her skin color. That she was capable and intelligent, and deserving of respect. Instead, she heard him chuckle. "You wish," he said, and all three men laughed. The contracts had slipped from Stephanie's numb fingers, scattering across the floor. She'd scrambled to pick them up, her vision blurring with tears. Her hands shaking so badly she could barely gather the pages. That's one way to shatter a heart. But stay tuned, you won't believe what happens next. Does Jongwoo regret what he said? If you're hooked, smash that like button, comment what Stephanie should do, and subscribe for more passionate Afro-Korean love stories. Hit that bell so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the story. She'd stumbled to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and sobbed until her throat was raw. 3 years. 3 years of Monday pastries and morning notes and staying late and learning his favorite everything. 3 years of convincing herself that the small moments meant something, that he saw her as more than just his assistant. And he'd laughed. He'd sat there while his friends disparaged black women, disparaged her, and he'd just laughed. That night, Stephanie went home to her small apartment in Hongdae and cried until she had no tears left. Then she'd sat up, wiped her face, and made a decision. No more. No more pathetic pining. No more reading into every small gesture. No more making herself vulnerable to a man who saw her as nothing more than a useful employee. She was done. Monday morning, Stephanie arrived at work at exactly 7 a.m., not the usual 7:30 she'd been coming in for 3 years. She'd dressed professionally, but simply, a plain white blouse and black slacks. No jewelry, no special effort, and no pastry on Jongwoo's desk. She'd placed his coffee there, black, no sugar, exactly as he liked it, along with his morning schedule. No note. When he arrived at 8 a.m., she'd timed it perfectly to avoid running into him. She watched through her computer screen's reflection as he paused at his desk. He looked at the coffee, then at the empty space where the pastry usually sat, then at the bare surface where her note should have been. His hand had hovered over his desk for a moment, as if searching for something that wasn't there. Then he'd sat down without a word. Stephanie kept her interactions with him purely professional after that. When he called her into his office, she came immediately. She was still his assistant, after all, and she was proud of her work ethic. But the long conversations were over. The small smiles, the gentle teasing, the lingering glances, all of it stopped. "Miss Stevenson, did you confirm the meeting with the Japanese investors?" "Yes, sir, 3 p.m. on Friday." "And the presentation for the board?" "On your desk, sir. All 60 slides, fully formatted." "Thank you. That will be all." "Yes, sir." She'd turn and walk out, her spine straight, her face carefully neutral. She stopped working late unless absolutely necessary. When 6 p.m. hit, she packed up her things and left, even if Jung-woo was still buried in work. She stopped bringing him lunch when he forgot to eat. Stopped making sure his favorite tie was always clean and pressed. Stopped caring about whether his day was good or bad. It hurt. God, it hurt like a physical wound, excising him from her heart. But she did it anyway, because the alternative, continuing to love someone who would never see her as an equal, who would laugh at the idea of being with someone like her, was worse. What Stephanie didn't know was that every absence was noticed. Jung-woo noticed when there was no pastry on Monday. He noticed when there was no note waiting for him each morning. He noticed when she stopped smiling at him, stopped lingering in his office, stopped caring about anything beyond her job description. And it was driving him insane. Shin Jong-woo had spent 20 years building walls around his heart. His father had been a cruel man, the kind who believed love was weakness and emotion was for women and children. He'd raised Jung-woo with an iron fist and impossible expectations. And when Jung-woo had dared to pursue technology instead of the family's manufacturing business, his father had disowned him. "You're dead to me," his father had said. "Don't come crawling back when you fail." Jung-woo had built Shin Enterprises from nothing, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing relationships and friendships, and any semblance of a personal life, all to prove his father wrong. And he had. He'd built a billion-dollar company by the time he was 30. But the cost had been high. He didn't know how to let people in, didn't know how to be vulnerable, didn't know how to admit that he needed someone. Until Stephanie Stevenson had walked into his office 3 years ago and slowly, methodically, dismantled every defense he'd spent a lifetime building. At first, he'd barely registered her beyond her competence. She was efficient, quick, intelligent, everything he needed in an assistant. The fact that she was beautiful had been inconvenient, distracting. But he'd trained himself not to notice the way her curves filled out her professional clothes, the way her natural curls framed her face, the way her dark skin seemed to glow in the morning light. Then she'd brought him that first Monday pastry. It had been such a small thing, such a thoughtful, unnecessary, kind thing, and it had cracked something open inside him. After that, he'd started noticing everything. The way she hummed softly when she was concentrating, the way she'd bite her lower lip when she was thinking, the way her entire face lit up when she smiled, which she did often with other employees, with clients, with everyone except him. Because she was always so carefully professional around him. The notes had undone him completely. Every morning, he'd arrive to find her words waiting for him, encouraging quotes, observations about the weather or the city, small reminders that someone was thinking about him, caring about his day. He'd started keeping them, filing them away in his desk drawer like precious things. Sometimes, late at night when he was alone in his penthouse, he'd take them out and read through them, and feel something warm and terrifying blooming in his chest. He'd known he was falling for her, had known and fought against it with everything he had. Because how could he love Stephanie Stevenson? She was his employee, she was American, she was black, and his world, the world of Seoul's business elite, was not kind to interracial relationships. His friends would question it, his business associates would whisper, the media would have a field day. And more than that, what did he have to offer her? He was a workaholic who barely slept, whose idea of a relationship was answering emails in bed. He was emotionally stunted, traumatized by his father, incapable of the kind of open, generous love that Stephanie deserved. She deserved someone better, someone who could give her a normal life, who could love her the way she should be loved. So he'd kept his distance, maintained professional boundaries, told himself that the ache in his chest when she smiled at other people was just indigestion. And when his friends had made those comments about her, about black women, he'd frozen. He should have defended her, should have told them to shut the fuck up, that Stephanie was worth 100 of them. But he'd panicked. If he'd defended her too vehemently, they would have known. They would have seen through him. So he'd laughed it off, hating himself for it, telling himself it was better this way. He hadn't realized she'd been listening. When the Monday pastries stopped coming, he'd told himself it didn't matter. When the notes disappeared, he'd told himself he didn't need them. When she started treating him with cool professionalism instead of warm familiarity, He'd told himself it was for the best. But the truth was, he was dying inside. His days felt colorless without her smiles. His mornings felt empty without her notes. He found himself watching the clock at 6 p.m., feeling something like panic when she packed up her things and left without a backward glance. He'd lie awake at night, staring at his ceiling, wondering what had changed, wondering if he'd done something wrong, wondering why the thought of losing her completely made him feel like he couldn't breathe. And then, 2 weeks after she'd changed, he'd been leaving the office late. One night he left earlier, 10 p.m. maybe, and he saw her. She'd been walking down the street in Gangnam, and she hadn't been alone. There was a man with her. A black man, tall and handsome, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket. He'd said something that made Stephanie laugh, really laugh, her head thrown back, her whole body shaking with joy, and then he'd pulled her close and kissed her. Jong-woo had felt his world stop. He'd stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, watching the woman he loved kiss another man, watching her be happy with someone else, watching her give her smiles and her laughter and her light to someone who wasn't him. His chest had felt tight. His eyes had burned. His hands had clenched into fists so hard his nails drew blood from his palms. "Sir," his driver, Mr. Lee, had approached cautiously. "Are you all right?" "Drive," Jong-woo had managed. "Just drive." He'd sat in the back of his car, shaking, his vision blurred, feeling something hot and wet on his cheeks. He was crying. Shin Jong-woo, who hadn't cried since his mother's funeral when he was 16, was crying over a woman. No, not just a woman. His woman. Except she wasn't his. Was she? He'd never claimed her, never told her how he felt, never given her any reason to wait for him. And now, it was too late. After that night, something broke inside Jong-woo. If he couldn't have Stephanie, he could at least know her, know everything about her, know what made her happy, what she did in her free time, who this man was that had stolen what should have been his. He hired a private investigator, one of the best, discreet, expensive. "I need to know everything about this man," he'd said, providing a photo he'd secretly taken that night. His name, his job, where he lives, where he goes, everything. The investigator had raised an eyebrow but hadn't asked questions. Rich men paid well for discretion. 3 days later, Jong-woo had a full dossier on his desk. Name: Richard Trey. Age: 29. Occupation: personal trainer at a luxury gym in Gangnam. Nationality: American. Chicago. Relationship status: dating Stephanie Stevenson for approximately 3 weeks. Background: former college athlete, moved to Seoul 6 months ago to teach fitness classes to wealthy Korean housewives. Known to be charming, outgoing, popular with clients. Jong-woo had read the file 3 times, memorizing every detail. Richard Trey. Personal trainer. Handsome, charming, probably good in bed. Probably made Stephanie laugh all the time. Probably didn't have a father complex or trust issues or a tendency to work 18-hour days. Probably perfect for her. Jong-woo had thrown the file across his office, scattering papers everywhere. Then he'd started watching them. It was easy to find out where Richard worked. The dossier had provided that information. Jong-woo would have his driver take him past the gym at strategic times. He'd watch Richard leaving, sometimes with Stephanie on his arm. He'd see them at restaurants, at coffee shops, walking through Hongdae on weekends. And every time he saw Richard touch her, a hand on her back, an arm around her waist, a kiss on her cheek, Jong-woo felt something violent and possessive rising in his chest. That should be him. He should be the one making her laugh. He should be the one holding her hand. He should be the one she smiled at like that. At work, he found himself trying to bridge the distance she'd created, complimenting her work more openly, asking about her weekend, trying to recreate those moments of connection they used to have. "Miss Stevenson, excellent job on the proposal. The investors were very impressed." "Thank you, sir. Did you have a good weekend?" She'd looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face. "Yes, sir. Very nice. Did you do anything interesting?" A pause. Then, carefully, "I spent time with someone special." The words had felt like a knife between his ribs. "Your boyfriend?" He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to reveal that he knew. She'd stiffened. I didn't realize my personal life was relevant to my work performance, Mr. Shin. It's not. He'd floundered. Unusual for him. I'm glad you're happy. Thank you, sir. Will that be all? He'd wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her that it wouldn't be all. That he needed her to stay. To talk to him like she used to look at him like he mattered. Instead, he'd said, yes, that will be all. She'd left, and he'd sat at his desk, feeling hollowed out. The obsession grew worse. He had the investigator follow Richard more closely. Had him document everywhere Richard went, everyone he talked to. And that's when the reports started coming back with discrepancies. Day 15. Subject met with female Korean, approximately 25 years old, at coffee shop in Sinchon. Interaction appeared intimate, holding hands, prolonged eye contact. Jong-woo had stared at those words, his heart beginning to pound. Day 18. Subject left gym with same female. Entered Love Hotel in Hongdae at 3:47 p.m. Exited at 6:23 p.m. Day 22. Subject met with different female Korean, approximately 30 years old, at bar in Itaewon. Left together at 11:34 p.m. Jong-woo had felt his blood turn to ice, then to fire. Richard Trey was cheating on Stephanie. Richard Trey was playing her, was using her, was touching her while also touching other women. Was making a fool of her, was... The coffee cup in Jong-woo's hand had shattered. He'd looked down, surprised, to see blood dripping from his palm where the porcelain had cut him. He hadn't felt it. All he'd felt was rage. Jong-woo had connections. Lots of them. Some legitimate, some less so. Building a billion-dollar company in Seoul required relationships with all types of people, including the kind of people who could make problems disappear. The kind who asked no questions and left no traces. He'd made a single phone call. There's someone I need dealt with. Not killed, he'd clarified quickly. Just taught a lesson. 2 days later, Richard Trey had stumbled out of a bar in Hongdae at 1 a.m. and been met by 3 men in a dark alley. They'd been efficient, professional. A few well-placed punches, maybe a broken rib or two, definitely a black eye and split lip. Enough to hurt, to scare, but not to cause permanent damage. Consider this a warning, one of them had said in English. Stay away from what doesn't belong to you. Then, they'd left Richard bleeding on the ground, and Jong-woo had received a single text message. Done. He'd stood on his penthouse balcony, looking out at the Seoul skyline, feeling nothing. No guilt, no remorse. Just a cold satisfaction that Richard Trey had gotten exactly what he deserved. The man had been playing with Stephanie's heart. Had been using her while seeing other women. Had been treating her like she was disposable, like she didn't matter, like she wasn't the most precious thing in the world. He'd deserved worse than a beating. Jong-woo had gone to bed that night and slept better than he had in weeks. The next morning, Jong-woo had arrived at his office at 7 a.m. as usual. By 8 a.m., when Stephanie still hadn't arrived, he'd started to feel uneasy. By 9 a.m., when there was still no sign of her, he'd called her phone. She'd answered on the 5th ring, and her voice had sounded strained. Hello, Mr. Shin. Miss Stevenson. You're not at work. I know, I'm sorry. I should have called earlier. I need to take a personal day. His fingers had tightened on his phone. Is everything all right? My boyfriend was attacked last night. I'm at the hospital with him now. Jong-woo had closed his eyes. I see. Is he badly hurt? Bad enough. Bruised ribs. Black eye. Split lip. Her voice had cracked slightly. The doctors say he'll be fine, but he's in pain. And I need to be here for him. Of course, the words had tasted like ash. Take all the time you need. Thank you, Mr. Shin. I'll be back tomorrow. She'd hung up, and Jong-woo had sat there, staring at his phone. He'd wanted to feel satisfied, victorious even. Richard Trey was hurt, scared, and Stephanie would soon discover what kind of man he really was. Instead, he'd felt hollow. Because Stephanie was at that hospital right now, worried and scared, taking care of a man who didn't deserve her care. And it was Jong-woo's fault that she was going through this pain. He'd picked up his phone again and called her back. Mr. Shin? She'd sounded surprised. Your boyfriend, he'd said, his voice cold. He deserved it. Silence on the other end. Excuse me? I said he deserved it. Whatever happened to him last night, he deserved worse, actually. How dare you? You should be at work tomorrow, Miss Stevenson. This isn't worth your time. He'd hung up before she could respond, his heart pounding, knowing he'd just made a terrible mistake but unable to stop himself. Because the alternative, telling her the truth, admitting what he'd done, would make her hate him even more. Stephanie had shown up at his office at 7 a.m. the next morning. Jong-woo had been at his desk, pretending to review emails, but really just staring at the screen without seeing anything. He'd barely slept the night before, replaying that phone conversation, hating himself more with each repetition. When his office door had slammed open, he'd looked up to find Stephanie standing there, her eyes blazing with fury. You did it. It wasn't a question. You had Richard beaten. Jong-woo had stood up slowly. Miss Stevenson. Don't you dare Miss Stevenson me right now. She'd strode into his office, slamming the door behind her. You had him attacked. You sent men to hurt him. And then you had the audacity to call me and say he deserved it. He'd said nothing. Just watched her, his heart pounding. Say something, she'd screamed. And he'd never heard her scream before. Had never seen her lose control like this. And something about it was both terrifying and beautiful. Yes. The word had come out flat. I did it. She'd staggered back as if he'd hit her. Oh my God. You're admitting it. You're not even denying it. Why would I deny it? It's true. I sent those men. I told them to hurt him. I watched them do it through a live feed. And I'd do it again. Why? Her voice had broken on the word, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do that? What gave you the right? Because he's cheating on you, Jong-woo had shouted back, his control finally snapping. He's been seeing other women since the beginning. He takes them to hotels while you're at work. He touches them the way he touches you. He doesn't deserve you, and I couldn't. His voice had cracked. I couldn't stand watching him treat you like you don't matter. Stephanie had frozen, her eyes wide. You're lying. I'm not. He'd pulled out his phone, opened the investigator's report, and handed it to her. See for yourself. She'd taken the phone with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the screen. He'd watched her face go through a series of emotions: disbelief, hurt, betrayal, devastation. You were stalking him, she'd whispered. Yes. You hired someone to follow him. Yes. You invaded my privacy, violated my trust, and assaulted someone because you were… What? Jealous? Yes, the word had exploded out of him. Yes, I was jealous. I'm so damn jealous I can barely breathe. I watch you smile at him and I want to destroy him. I see him touch you, and I want to break his hands. I hear you talk about him, and I want to. He'd stopped, his chest heaving. Stephanie had stared at him, tears still streaming down her face. You have no right to feel that way, no right to act on those feelings, no right to interfere in my life. I know. 3 years, Jong-woo. She'd used his first name, and hearing it from her lips had felt like a blade. I spent 3 years trying to get you to notice me. Do you know what I did? Do you know how pathetic I was? Stephanie. I brought you pastries every Monday because I knew you were stressed. I left you notes every morning because I wanted you to know someone cared. I stayed late. I learned Korean for you. I learned your favorite color, your favorite food, how you take your coffee, what makes you smile, what makes you angry. Her voice had risen with each word, raw and broken. I killed myself trying to be perfect for you, trying to be worthy of you. And you know what happened? Stephanie, please. I heard you, she'd screamed. I heard you and your friends. I heard them talk about black women like we're nothing, like we're too much, too loud, too different. And I waited, God, I waited for you to defend me, to say something, anything. Jong-woo had felt his blood run cold. You heard that? I heard you laugh. The devastation in her voice had gutted him. I heard you say you wish when they suggested you had feelings for me. I heard it all. And that's when I knew I was a fool. I didn't mean… So I stopped. She'd wiped her tears angrily. I stopped bringing pastries, stopped leaving notes, stopped caring, and I tried to move on. I met Richard. And yeah, maybe I rushed into it. Maybe I was trying to fill a void. But he was mine. My choice, my decision, my life. He was using you. That wasn't your call to make. Her voice had echoed through the office. You don't get to decide who's good enough for me. You don't get to play protector after 3 years of treating me like I'm invisible. You don't get to hurt people on my behalf when you've spent 3 years hurting me. Jong-woo had felt something crack inside his chest. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. She'd stepped closer, her finger jabbing into his chest. You hurt me every single day, every time you looked through me, every time you took my work for granted, every time you let people disrespect me in your presence, every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough. You are enough, he'd whispered desperately. You're more than enough. You're everything. Now? She'd laughed bitterly. Now you say that? Now that I've moved on? Now that I've finally stopped waiting for you? I was scared. The admission had burst out of him. I was terrified, Stephanie, because I've never felt like this before. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be vulnerable. I don't know how to admit that I need someone. So you had my boyfriend beaten instead? Her voice had been venomous. That's your solution? Violence? Control? Stalking? I was protecting you. From what? From making my own mistakes? From living my own life? From being an adult who can make her own choices? She'd shoved against his chest. You don't get to do that. You don't get to control me. You don't get to make decisions for me. I know. He'd grabbed her wrists, gently, desperately. I know I crossed a line. I know what I did was wrong. But I couldn't. His voice had broken. I couldn't watch him disrespect you like that. I couldn't watch him touch you while touching other women. I couldn't stand knowing you were wasting your beautiful heart on someone who didn't deserve you. And you do? She'd tried to pull away, but he'd held on. You think you deserve me? After everything you've done? After all the ways you failed me? No. The word had been simple. Honest. I don't deserve you. I never have. You're brilliant, and kind, and strong. And I'm just broken. Damaged. Emotionally stunted. But I love you. Stephanie had gone still, her eyes widening. I love you, he'd repeated, the words tumbling out now. Unstoppable. I've loved you since the first Monday you brought me that pastry. Since the first note you left on my desk. Since the first time you smiled at me like I mattered. I love the way you hum when you work. I love how you bite your lip when you're thinking. I love your intelligence. Your compassion. Your strength. Stop. Her voice had been barely a whisper. I love how you learned Korean for me. How you stayed late even when you didn't have to. How you saw the best in me even when I couldn't see it in myself. His thumbs had stroked across her wrists, feeling her pulse racing. I love you so much that watching you with someone else nearly destroyed me. I love you so much that I became someone I barely recognize. Someone obsessive and possessive and capable of violence. Jong-woo. I know that's not romantic. I know love shouldn't make you crazy. But you do, Stephanie. You make me absolutely insane. And I'm sorry. His voice had cracked. I'm so sorry for hurting you, for not defending you, for not claiming you when I had the chance, for watching you love me for 3 years and being too much of a coward to love you back. She'd been crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. But I'm not sorry for having Richard beaten, he'd continued. And she'd flinched. Because he was disrespecting you. He was playing you. And someone needed to teach him that you're not a woman to be trifled with. That you're precious. That you're... I am not yours to protect. She'd ripped her hands away from him, stumbling backward. I am not some damsel who needs rescuing. I am not a possession that you can claim and defend and control. I know that. No, you don't. Her chest had been heaving, her hands clenched into fists. You think you can just confess your feelings and everything will be okay? You think 3 years of indifference can be erased by one emotional speech? No, but... You stalked me, Jong-woo. You invaded my privacy. You hired people to follow my boyfriend. You orchestrated violence against someone I cared about. Her voice had risen with each word. That's not love. That's obsession. That's possession. That's control. You're right. He'd held up his hands, surrendering. You're absolutely right. What I did was wrong. Unforgivable even. But I can't regret it, Stephanie. I can't regret trying to protect you from someone who was hurting you. By hurting him. She'd shaken her head. Don't you see how twisted that is? Don't you see that you've become the very thing you were trying to protect me from? The words had hit him like a physical blow. He'd started, then stopped. Because she was right. God, she was right. I need you to understand something. Stephanie had stepped closer, her voice deadly calm. I am not a prize to be won. I am not a territory to be defended. I am a person. A complete autonomous person who makes her own choices and lives with her own consequences. I know that. Do you? She'd searched his face. Because it doesn't seem like you do. It seems like you think you know what's best for me. Like you think your feelings give you rights over my life. That's not. It is. She'd cut him off. You hired someone to investigate my boyfriend without my knowledge or consent. You orchestrated violence against him without my input. You made decisions about my life without including me. That's not love, Jong-woo. That's control. He'd felt something cold settling in his stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying. She'd taken a shaky breath. I'm saying that I can't be with someone who thinks love means ownership, who thinks protection means control, who thinks caring about someone gives them the right to make choices for that person. Stephanie, please. And I'm saying that you need help. Her voice had softened slightly. Professional help. Because what you did, the stalking, the violence, the obsession, that's not healthy. That's not sustainable. That's not the foundation for any kind of relationship. I'll get help. The words had tumbled out desperately. I'll see a therapist. I'll work on my control issues. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please. Don't. She'd held up her hand. Don't make promises you might not keep. Don't try to fix this right now. Just sit with what you've done. Really sit with it. Understand how violated I feel. How betrayed. How scared. Scared? The word had gutted him. You're scared of me? A little, yeah. She'd wrapped her arms around herself. Because if you could do this, hire people to hurt someone, stalk me without my knowledge, what else are you capable of? What happens the next time someone gets close to me? What happens if I make a choice you don't approve of? Jong-woo had felt his entire world crumbling. I would never hurt you. You already have. The simple statement had destroyed him. You've been hurting me for 3 years. You just chose different weapons. Silence had fallen between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Stephanie had spoken again. Her voice tired. I need time. I need space. I need to figure out what I want, separate from your feelings and your obsession and your control. How much time? I don't know. She'd moved toward the door. Maybe a lot. Maybe forever. Stephanie, he'd started toward her, but she'd held up her hand again. No. Don't touch me. Don't follow me. Don't have people watch me. Just leave me alone. I can't. You have to. Her eyes had met his, fierce and broken and beautiful. Because if you can't respect this one boundary, then there's no hope for us. There's no possibility of anything. You'll prove that everything I said about you is true. He'd frozen, every instinct screaming at him to chase her, to fight for her, to make her understand. But she was right. Again. If he couldn't respect her need for space, he truly was the controlling obsessive she'd accused him of being. Okay, he'd whispered. Okay, I'll give you space. Thank you. She'd opened the door, then paused. And Jong-woo? Get help. Real help. Not just to get me back, but because you need it. Because what you did wasn't okay. And if you ever want any kind of healthy relationship with me or anyone, you need to figure out why you thought it was. Then she'd walked out, and he'd stood there in his empty office, feeling like his chest had been cracked open. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Jong-woo's life. True to his word, he didn't contact Stephanie, didn't have her followed, didn't show up at her apartment. He gave her space, even though it killed him. Instead, he threw himself into work 14, 16, 18-hour days. Anything to avoid thinking about her anything to avoid the gaping hole she'd left in his life. But it didn't work. Everything reminded him of her. The empty space on his desk where her notes used to be, the Monday mornings without pastries. The way 6 p.m. would roll around and she wouldn't be there because she'd stopped working late months ago. His office felt like a mausoleum without her presence. On the third day after their confrontation, he'd called a therapist. Dr. Kim was a middle-aged woman who specialized in attachment issues and trauma, and she didn't pull punches. What? You described the stalking, the orchestrated violence, the obsessive monitoring. These are serious red flags. She'd said during their first session, they suggest some deep-rooted control issues and possibly an anxious attachment style stemming from childhood trauma. My father, Jong-woo had said quietly. Tell me about him. And for the first time in his life, Jong-woo had talked about it. All of it. His father's cruelty, his mother's passive acceptance, the way love had always been conditional, earned through achievement and obedience, the way he'd learned that caring about people gave them power to hurt you. So you built walls, Dr. Kim had observed. You decided that not letting people in was safer than risking that kind of pain again. Yes. But Stephanie got through anyway. Yes. His voice had cracked, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to be vulnerable without trying to control the outcome. Control is often how trauma survivors try to manage their anxiety, Dr. Kim had explained. If you can control everything, the variables, the people, the situations, then you can't be hurt again. But real love requires relinquishing control. It requires trust, and that terrifies you. She'd been right. Over the following sessions, Jong-woo had started unpacking years of damage. The way his father had taught him that emotions were weakness. The way he'd learned to view relationships as transactions. The way he'd internalized the belief that he wasn't worthy of love unless he was perfect, successful, in control. You think if Stephanie really knew you, the broken, scared, damaged parts, she wouldn't want you, Doctor. Kim had said during their fourth session. So you've been performing, being perfect, never showing vulnerability. But that's not sustainable, and it's not real intimacy. How do I fix it? He'd asked desperately. You start by accepting that you can't control whether Stephanie chooses you. You can only control your own behavior, your own healing, your own growth. You have to do the work for yourself, not for her. It had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, harder than building his company, harder than standing up to his father. Learning to sit with discomfort, learning to feel his feelings instead of controlling them. Learning to trust that even if Stephanie never came back, he would be okay. Meanwhile, Stephanie had gone through her own hell. She'd broken up with Richard, of course. The evidence of his cheating had been irrefutable. When she'd confronted him, he'd tried to deny it at first, then had gotten angry, defensive. So what if I saw other people? He'd said. We never said we were exclusive. We've been dating for a month, Richard. We've been sleeping together. Of course we were exclusive. You're overreacting. Korean girls don't make such a big deal about this stuff. And there it was, the casual racism, the assumption that she should be grateful for his attention, the sense of entitlement. She'd walked out and never looked back. But that left her with everything else. The confusion, the hurt, the anger at Jong-woo for interfering, mixed with grudging gratitude that he'd exposed Richard's true nature. The complicated, messy, terrifying realization that she might still love Jong-woo, even after everything he'd done. She'd started seeing her own therapist, Dr. Park, a Korean-American woman who understood the specific challenges of being a black woman in Seoul. It's okay to have complicated feelings, Doctor. Park had told her. It's okay to be angry at him for violating your boundaries while also understanding that his intentions came from a place of caring. Both things can be true. But what he did was wrong. Stephanie had insisted. Absolutely. The stalking, the violence, those were serious violations. But people are complex. They can do terrible things and still be capable of growth and change. The question is, do you believe he's willing to do that work? Stephanie hadn't known the answer. She'd thrown herself into her work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office, partly to avoid going home to her empty apartment, partly to avoid running into Jong-woo, who she knew was also working long hours. They existed in the same building, on the same floor, but they might as well have been on different planets. Sometimes she'd catch glimpses of him through his office window, in the elevator, in the hallway. He always looked tired, thinner, like he wasn't sleeping or eating. Part of her wanted to go to him, to make sure he was okay. The other part reminded her that he'd stalked her boyfriend and orchestrated violence, that she needed to protect herself first. On the 15th day after their confrontation, something shifted. Stephanie had stayed late to finish a presentation, and when she'd finally left at 10 p.m., she'd found Jong-woo waiting by the elevators. Her heart had stuttered. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," he'd said simply. Then, "I'm not waiting for you. I'm just working late." Okay. They'd stood there awkwardly, waiting for the elevator. When it arrived, they'd both gotten in, standing on opposite sides of the small space. "How have you been?" Jong-woo had asked quietly. "I ended things with Richard." "I heard. I'm sorry." "Are you?" She'd looked at him. "Really?" Yes. His eyes had met hers, and she'd seen nothing but sincerity there. "I'm sorry that you were hurt. I'm sorry that you wasted time on someone who didn't deserve you. I'm sorry that my actions complicated an already painful situation." The elevator had dinged, and they'd both gotten out. "I've been seeing a therapist," Jong-woo had said as they walked toward the building exit. Stephanie had stopped. "What?" "A therapist. Dr. Kim. We've had 5 sessions so far. We're working on my control issues, my trauma from my father, my inability to be vulnerable." He'd turned to face her. "You were right. What I did wasn't healthy. It wasn't love. It was possession. And I'm trying to understand why I thought that was okay." She'd stared at him, speechless. "I'm not telling you this to win you back," he'd continued. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know that I heard you, that I'm taking responsibility, that I'm doing the work not for you, but for myself." Jong-woo. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that you changed me, Stephanie. You made me want to be better. And even if you never speak to me again, I'll be grateful for that." He'd started to walk away, but this time, it was Stephanie who stopped him. "Wait." He'd turned, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "I've been seeing a therapist too," she'd admitted, "trying to work through everything. The anger, the hurt, the complicated feelings." "Complicated?" She'd taken a breath. "I can't forgive you yet. What you did was wrong, and I need more time to process it. But I don't hate you. I wish I could, but I don't." "Stephanie, let me finish." She'd held up her hand. "I need you to understand something. If, and this is a big if we ever try again, things have to be different. Complete honesty. Complete transparency. No more stalking. No more controlling behavior. No more making decisions about my life without me." Yes, the word had been immediate, fervent, anything. "And I need time. Real time. Not days or weeks, but maybe months. Time to heal. Time to trust again. Time to see if you really can change." "I understand. Can you do that?" She'd searched his face. "Can you give me time without pushing, without trying to control the outcome?" He'd looked at her for a long moment, and she'd seen the struggle in his eyes. The part of him that wanted to fight, to claim, to possess, warring with the part that loved her enough to let her go. Finally, he'd nodded. "Yes, I can do that." "Okay." She'd felt something loosen in her chest. "Okay." They'd stood there for another moment, the soul night stretching around them, full of possibility and pain and the fragile hope of new beginnings. "Good night, Stephanie," Jong-woo had said softly. "Good night, Jong-woo." Stephanie was reviewing contracts in her office when there was a knock on her door. "Come in." Jong-woo entered, holding 2 coffee cups. "I brought you your favorite. Caramel macchiato, extra shot, light foam." She looked up, surprised. Over the past 6 months, they'd slowly, carefully rebuilt their relationship. It had started with professional interactions, polite, distant, safe. Then, occasional conversations at the office. Then coffee meetings to discuss work projects. And somewhere along the way, it had become more. Jungwoo had kept his promise. He'd given her space, continued therapy, worked on his control issues, learned to sit with uncertainty, practiced vulnerability. And Stephanie had watched him change. Really change. Not performing, not pretending, but genuinely doing the hard work of becoming a better person. "Thank you," she said, accepting the coffee. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." He sat down across from her, and she noticed he didn't immediately start discussing work. "How are you?" "Good, busy. The new contract with the Japanese firm is taking up a lot of my time." "You've been staying late." It wasn't accusatory, just observant. "Yeah, well, big project." "Are you taking care of yourself? Eating? Sleeping?" She smiled despite herself. "Yes, Mom." He smiled back, and God, it still made her heart skip. "Sorry. Old habits. Dr. Kim says I need to work on not trying to manage everyone's wellness." "How is therapy going?" "Good. Hard, but good. We're working on my fear of abandonment now. Apparently, watching my mother passively accept my father's cruelty gave me some interesting complexes." Stephanie set down her coffee. "Jungwoo, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why now? Why me? After all these years of keeping people at a distance, why did you let me in?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because you didn't ask me to. Everyone else in my life wanted something. My money, my connections, my approval. But you just cared. You brought me pastries because I was stressed. You left me notes because you thought I'd like them. You stayed late because you were invested in the work, not because you were trying to impress me." "I was absolutely trying to impress you," she admitted. "Maybe at first, but it evolved into something else. You genuinely cared about me as a person, not as a CEO or a resource. And that terrified me, because caring meant being vulnerable. And vulnerable meant being hurt. Do you still feel that way?" "Sometimes, but I'm learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's actually the bravest thing you can do. Let someone see the real you and trust they won't destroy you with that knowledge." Stephanie felt her throat tighten. "That's very insightful." "I've had a lot of therapy." He leaned forward. "Stephanie, I know we're taking this slow. I know you need more time. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. However long it takes for you to trust me again, I'll wait. And if I never fully trust you again, then I'll accept that, because I'd rather have you in my life as a colleague, an acquaintance, or even just a memory than not have you at all." She studied him, this complicated, damaged, brilliant man who'd hurt her so badly and was now trying so hard to heal. "What if I said I'm ready?" she whispered. Jungwoo went very still. "Ready for what?" "To try, to really try. Not just coffee meetings and professional conversations, but dating, a real relationship." "Stephanie." Her name came out rough, desperate. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "I'm terrified, actually. Because you hurt me, Jungwoo. You really hurt me. And I don't know if I can survive you doing it again." "I won't, I swear to you." "You can't promise that." She cut him off gently. "People hurt each other. Even people who love each other. That's just part of being human. But what you can promise is that you'll keep doing the work. Keep going to therapy. Keep being honest with me. Keep choosing vulnerability over control." "I can do that. I am doing that." "Then," she took a breath, "then let's try." Jungwoo stood up, moved around the desk, and dropped to his knees in front of her chair. He took her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling. "I love you," he said, his eyes shining. "I love you so much, it scares me. But I'm learning to sit with that fear. I'm learning that love isn't about possession or control. It's about partnership, trust, mutual respect. And I promise that I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of yours." Stephanie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you too. I've loved you for so long, even when I didn't want to. Even when you hurt me. Even when I tried to move on." "I'm sorry." He pressed his forehead to their joined hands. "I'm so sorry for all of it. For not seeing you. For not claiming you when I had the chance. For violating your boundaries. For thinking I knew what was best for you. I know, and I forgive you." The words surprised her, but once they were out, she realized they were true. I forgive you, Jong-woo. Not because what you did was okay, but because you're genuinely trying to change, because you're doing the work, because you're choosing to be better. He looked up at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. Can I kiss you? Yes. He stood, pulling her up with him, and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs stroked across her cheekbones, wiping away her tears. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy, he whispered. Just love me, she whispered back. That's all I need. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. Like all the pain and heartbreak and struggle had led them to this moment, this perfect, imperfect, beautifully complicated moment. When they broke apart, they were both crying. So, Jong-woo said, his forehead resting against hers. Does this mean you'll start bringing me Monday pastries again? Stephanie laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Don't push your luck. Fair enough. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I've missed you. I've been right here. I know, but I've missed this. Holding you. Being close to you. Not having to pretend I don't want you more than my next breath. She pulled back to look at him. Jong-woo? If you ever stalk me again, I'm leaving and never coming back. Noted. No stalking. Or orchestrate violence. No violence. Or make decisions about my life without consulting me. Full transparency. Partnership. Communication. Good. She kissed him softly. As long as we're clear. Crystal clear. He smiled against her lips. I'm a reformed man. Totally rehabilitated. You're still in therapy. I'm a work in progress then. Aren't we all? They stood there in her office, the Seoul skyline glittering through the windows, holding each other like they were the only two people in the world. Thank you, Jong-woo said quietly. For what? For giving me another chance. For being patient with my healing. For being brave enough to love me despite everything I've done. He kissed her forehead. For being you. Stephanie felt her heart swell. Thank you for doing the work. For choosing to change. For loving me enough to let me go so I could choose to come back. Always, he promised. I'll always choose you. In every lifetime, in every version of this story, I'll choose you. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. Even when I'm angry? Even then. Even when. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she melted into him, letting herself believe, really believe, that maybe they could make this work. That maybe broken people could heal together. That maybe love, real love, was messy and complicated and hard but worth fighting for. When they finally broke apart, Jong-woo rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, he whispered. Jong-woo. Not right now, whenever you're ready. A month? 6 months? A year? But, eventually. Move in with me. Let me wake up next to you every morning. Let me fall asleep holding you every night. Let me prove that I can be the partner you deserve. Stephanie pulled back, searching his face. What happened to taking things slow? This is slow for me. If I had my way, I'd marry you tomorrow. He caught her hand, pressed it over his heart. But I'm learning patience. I'm learning that some things are worth waiting for. That rushing leads to mistakes. That real, lasting love is built, not rushed. Who are you and what have you done with Shin Jong-woo? He laughed. Dr. Kim's been very effective. Clearly. So, will you think about it? I'll think about it, she agreed. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No more lies. No more protecting me from things you think I can't handle. Complete honesty. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I promise. His eyes were serious. Complete transparency. You'll always know where I am, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking. Even the ugly parts. Even the parts I'm ashamed of. Thank you. They kissed again, softer this time, sweeter, and Stephanie let herself imagine a future with this man. A future where trust was rebuilt, where love was honest and open and healthy. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days. Days when old wounds reopened. Days when his control issues flared up, or her trust wavered. But they would face those days together. With honesty. With therapy. With the commitment to keep choosing each other. Even when it was hard. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you more, he whispered back. Not possible. Definitely possible. Jongwoo. Stephanie. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. They broke apart quickly, both slightly flushed, as Mrs. Park opened the door. Oh. She stopped short, taking in the scene, Jongwoo and Stephanie standing very close, looking thoroughly kissed. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. It's fine, Mrs. Park, Stephanie said, trying not to smile. We were just finishing up. Mrs. Park's eyes flickered between them, a knowing smile crossing her face. Of course. Mr. Shin, your 3 p.m. is waiting in the conference room. Thank you, I'll be right there. Jongwoo squeezed Stephanie's hand once before releasing it. Miss Stevenson, thank you for your input on the project. Of course, Mr. Shin. As he walked past Mrs. Park, Stephanie saw the older woman's smile widen. After he left, Mrs. Park stepped fully into the office. So, you and Mr. Shin. Stephanie felt her cheeks heat. We're trying. Good. Mrs. Park's expression softened. He's been miserable these past months. We all noticed. And you've been different too. Sadder. You all knew? Please. The man looks at you like you hung the moon. Everyone knew except you two, apparently. She paused. He's a good man, Stephanie. Complicated, damaged, but good. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Even with all the... Stephanie gestured vaguely. Everyone has a past. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is whether they're willing to learn from them. Mrs. Park moved toward the door. For what it's worth, I think you're good for each other. He softens your edges. You strengthen his core. After she left, Stephanie sat back down at her desk, but she couldn't focus on the contracts anymore. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened a new note. Dear Jongwoo, thank you for the coffee this morning. Thank you for respecting my boundaries. Thank you for doing the hard work of healing. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for loving me. She smiled, saved the note, and got back to work. 3 floors up, Jongwoo's phone chimed. He excused himself from his meeting, stepped into the hallway, and opened the message. His eyes burned as he read it. Then read it again. Then saved it in a folder labeled Stephanie, where it joined dozens of other notes, both the old ones she'd written 3 years ago and new ones they'd exchanged over the past months. He typed back a response. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for being brave enough to love me anyway. Thank you for being you. He sent it, took a deep breath, and returned to his meeting. 6 months ago, he'd been a broken man, drowning in his own obsession and control issues, having just lost the most important person in his life. Now, he was still broken. Healing was a process, not a destination, but he had hope. Well, that's it for now, dearest listeners. Tell me, what part of this story kept you hooked? Indeed, love is a beautiful thing, and we should all experience it at least once in our lifetime. If you enjoyed the story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Give this video a like, and hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss videos like this.